Aloha, my name is Mike Deweert. This is the Think Tech Foundation, of course, and the name of the show is For the Benefit of Humankind, because science is, the purpose of science is to predict and control nature for the benefit of humankind. That's what I was taught when I'm a kid, and I'm sticking to it. Today, we have a show on agricultural sustainability. We're going to talk about genetically modified organisms, organic farming, and other issues that are of very current interest here in Hawaii. My guest today is Juanita Kawamoto Brown. Juanita is the chair of the Food and Farm Sustainability Committee for the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. She's been in agriculture for what? 10 years, 20 years?
Many years.
Many years, okay. we won't go into exactly how many years. And you've been studying agriculture in Hawaii for a long time, but you've also been following the legislature closely for years now, and farm policy in Hawaii, especially the GMO issues.
Yes.
So I guess of course, the contemporary issue right now with the GMO is what they've done on Big Island with banning GMOs. Except for papaya, I understand. And I was wondering if you just address some of what you see as the issues on maybe not Big Island, but in general in Hawaii. Why are genetically modified organisms such a big deal here in Hawaii?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Michael, for inviting me on this show and sharing my opinions and views.
Yeah.
Being a native Hawaiian and being a part of an organization like the Environmental Caucus has really helped broaden my perspective on a lot of things that impact. I'm born and raised here, as many of the generations before me that are part of what makes Hawaii Hawaii have watched so many things happen. And in particular, to get to your point so that people know where my perspective is coming from on this issue, is, all agriculture in Hawaii needs to be sustainable, period. 1,500 years ago, moving forward, Hawaiians were able to feed 1 million people sustainably.
Well, even in the 60s, we made 80% of our food back in the 60s.
Exactly.
Now we import 80%.
Exactly.
What's up with that?
So all of that being said, we really have always been focused on food for Hawaii as much as possible when we're talking about the people who live here, the 1 million plus people who live in the state of Hawaii. When we look at things where we bring in other agriculture that becomes an export out of Hawaii, now you're talking about a different kind of sustainability. And I consider that sustainability economic sustainability. So when you have industries like pineapple, sugarcane, now seed crop, other things that are actually grown here but exported in the purpose of helping corporations be able to create the bottom line they need to keep companies and jobs going for everyone, its purpose is clear. But like any state, any country, there always has to be a balance. And when you live in a unique state like the state of Hawaii, where we are an island state, it's even more critical for us to have a good, healthy, balanced system. So I guess when we go straight into the issues as to why some of the other, the issue with genetically modified organism, biotech farming, all of those things that are coming to the forefront as far as our community is concerned, and they should be concerned, is understanding how can we have the balance between economic sustainability and agricultural food sustainability. And I think that it's a fair concern in some of the islands who are considered the breadbasket for Hawaii, for example. And let's look at Hawaii Island. Without me speaking for their kuleana, because I am not from Mokuokeawe, and that's the proper name for Hawaii Island, is Mokuokeawe, as far as what should be, looked at when we talk about the island of Hawaii. Okay, that island being a major breadbasket for centuries, that's where Kamehameha the Great originated out of. You look at that being the main source of where people have been able to depend on our food, and you have concerns about how do we balance food sustainability with economic sustainability again. So when you look at a crop that is something that may cause concern or imbalance to food sustainability, potential food sustainability, in addition to potentially creating other issues that are maybe environmentally inappropriate. You know, all those things, only the people from that aina can honestly sit there every day, look at it, and say, this is impacting us, this isn't impacting us. So where I'm going to with Hawaii Island is, if the people are now declaring home rule, which every island should be entitled to that, in my opinion, especially when we're talking about food and farm sustainability. Each island has to look at itself and direct what should and shouldn't be going on there for themselves, because they are there existing. And so, so again, I'm trying to stay online with our GMO question.
Sure. Oh, no, you go where you need to. It's all about agriculture.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But all of it being about agriculture and that balance and that need for us to understand where they're coming from. When they put out things like the ban, I think that it isn't just a trendy vision that's coming out of nowhere. I think people are very concerned about the right to know what's happening in their communities. And perhaps I would look at the companies that exist there for so many years that have been able to coexist in a very positive and harmonious way, that if there's something happening that they have to go to an extreme, then there's a disconnect somewhere. And so that disconnect is based on information or lack of it. The disconnect may be because of real serious concerns, as you're talking about. This is a science show, and that we're talking about what are the different functions that happen when a company that does biotech farming in comparison to other forms of farming methodology, and its actual purpose as it going for economic sustainability more so than food sustainability. People are going to go and say, what does this island want to do? And so what does the state want to do? Because all these things come back to us as the people, and then in the government, how are we going to go ahead and balance? Okay, so with regards to that ban and where the people are coming from there, it's a choice that they're making to say it matters. And I would recommend to anyone that has businesses or farms that are directed in this direction, as I'm watching them slowly do right now, is to continue the conversation with their communities. You know, and continue to educate us on the different areas that you feel you're making improvements. Just like what this show is about, is educating all of us out there on different issues for humankind. I really love the name of your show, because that is such a pono thing for Hawaiian people and our culture. So Hawaii Island, my opinion on what's happening there is that what is existing and what's the problem there is really about people communicating clearly what's the goal for each aina that's looking at what's happening.
Yeah, if I be devil's advocate for just a minute, when you talk about the islands being able to have this sovereignty and self-rule, and yet all the cargo that comes into the state, almost all of it comes through the port of Honolulu. There wouldn't be economic sustainability without those cargo ships coming here, then dispersing the cargo elsewhere. And without the economic engine that we have on Oahu for the state, it might not be a lot of economic sustainability. So is it really pono for people on other islands to say, well, sure, you can transship all your cargo here and provide all this infrastructure for our economy, but we don't want to. We want to still decide whether we're going to feed you guys or not. How would you respond to those kinds of arguments?
You know that again, I take a lot of heart and aloha when it comes to the Hawaiian culture, and their ability to be so sustainable for all these hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Prior to, the influence coming from what we do with shipping product in, what kind of product do we ship in, how do we feed these million people, so forth. As I said at the beginning of our discussion, Hawaiians were able to feed 1 million people.
Yeah.
So that means the area of land, the forms of farming that existed for the entire state at that time, and we can't even call it a state, it was a nation then.
Yeah.
When that nation existed, they fed all their people and they respected what we call kuleana rights.
Yeah.
Okay, and today we still have to remind people out there, even though we're part of a different type of governance that exists here too, that there are still that belief and that practice of kuleana right.
Sure.
And what kuleana right means to those who don't know the definition of that is its focus on the people who live in that particular area, meaning in this case that island. So if they're able to successfully live and be able to feed themselves and be economically viable and viable in a sense of just living their lives the way they choose to, by providing the food, natural food source that they do have there, without really getting too much into a situation where there's a crisis because we have lack of shipping coming in from Oahu to Hawaii Island. I think we would discover that Hawaii Island would be very successful at feeding itself, about providing its own resources and taking care of all the things that that island needs to do to care for their people. Now, that being said, again, they care about not just themselves, but they also care, and this is the other thing about kuleana that some people may or may not understand. When they are able to care for themselves, they are also, if there is an abundance, they can help share with others. And it is their choice. And so when we come over from, example, the island of Oahu and say to Hawaii Island, if you have an abundance that's exceeding what you can do to take care of your own people, would you be able to share that with the rest of us? You will find most of the people who farm and are in ag will be happy to be part of that, but there has to be that understanding of respect. So
that's what democracy is about.
So that's what it is about, isn't it? And so again, when we look at different philosophies, and especially in agriculture, there are many different forms of farming method, and some will be biotechnology, and there are conventional farms that use biotech seed to grow, for example, on Hawaii Island, papaya. And and the process as to what exactly is involved in doing biotech papaya is something that research and study has shown that there are positive things that are part of why we have biotech papaya. But then there's also now natural and organic papaya coming back to the island. And the purpose of biotech papaya when it came in was we were inundated with a virus that created such a problem for the industry, which was again becoming to a level where it became an economic sustainability. So the papaya industry is saying, I don't make enough to export because this virus is attacking our papaya. And with the good intentions of humankind and science, they try to discover a way to battle the virus and make a stronger, healthier papaya. And so people were okay with what that process was at the time. Certain people were, and still are today. And again, it was a choice that business made. And community was okay with that at that time.
It's good. So on that note, we need to take a break. This is Think Tech. This is the show for the benefit of humankind. We're talking to Juanita Kawamoto Brown about sustainable agriculture in Hawaii, and we'll be back shortly. So. Welcome back. This is Think Tech. This show is for the benefit of humankind. I'm Mike Deweert. I'm talking today to Juanita Kawamoto Brown about sustainable agriculture and some of the issues of genetically modified organisms and more broadly biotech agriculture and the future of Hawaii agriculture. And before the break, we were talking about the coexistence of papayas that are organic and papayas that are biotech, and let's perhaps continue on from that point.
Right. And so again, I wasn't so much talking about coexistence as I was saying that the reasoning behind why GMO papaya was created was because there was an economic sustainability that needed to be managed.
The virus was a
and
threat
the
to the whole
virus
papaya
was a
industry.
threat to that industry, and therefore they came up with what they hoped would be good solution.
Right.
Then I think when we go and we move forward on that, again, there are options like anything. And if we're going to talk about economic sustainability, it's that choice that allows the economy to be able to thrive from a capitalistic point of view. Right? And so the choices were, we can provide you with this kind of food system from this kind of crop, or we can provide you this kind of food system from this kind of crop. So the concern about where those two things today still exist in our state is still something that people of Hawaii are working out together. They're figuring it out.
The people of the state of Hawaii.
Yes, the people of Hawaii are trying to figure it out. They're trying to determine today, is that something that we still want to maintain as an economic, viable, sustainable resource? And is it impacting our food sustainability? Because, you know, it kind of, to me, it backs up a little bit and says, you have large commercial farming versus small family farms, and those family farms practicing sometimes more of a kind of farming that is first for them to feed their family and then go out to extend to their community. And because of that kind of farming, they have a really good management. They call them good agricultural practices. And this is something that all farms have to do in the state of Hawaii to function, especially if they're here to provide food for our people. So good agricultural practices kind of define themselves where, again, it's something that the U.S. government, the USDA, dictates a certain requirement. The Department of Agriculture dictates a kind of requirement, and other groups that are concerned about the health of food for people have their requirements all the way down the line. So biotech in this whole formula of where we're talking about today, where does that exist? I have questions myself, you know, and when you asked me to come on this show, it was to share some of the knowledge I have, but I also have thoughts and concerns because I would like our community to have a broader view, you know, and a good understanding. Because once we make the choice, it's really important we make good ones, right? And so, you know, my concerns when I think of large commercial farming development is always going to start off with issues like what we're seeing now again with home rule preemption concerning pesticide use. Okay, again, we have the value of what kind of sustainability is associated with it. And then we also have the concern about, you know, when you have this large, massive, over 56% of state ag lands, and it could be more. That was my last quota to me from the Department of Agriculture, is that, you know, when we look at such a large ag user, that,
I mean the seed corn industry.
Well,
or seed crop.
That's where I'm going. It's biotech companies in whatever form that they're here to do farming, whether it's for seed crop, whether it's for research for other crops, all these other things that are involved. Over 56% of our state ag lands are leased to those types of companies. Obviously, that's a huge economic factor for the state. And so when the state is trying to determine, in my opinion, how do we now make sure all these things are safe for our
Right.
people? How do we
Right.
make sure that we can still keep this economic engine working
Right.
for both the companies and the people?
Right.
How do we do that? Is it possible?
Yeah.
You know, and I believe myself personally that things are possible because there's a strong communication, understanding, and a willingness to accept certain factors that we have to come together on.
Right.
Okay, so that being said, the concerns that I have question on for the biotech industry and pesticide use. My thoughts go to things like the pollution factor of all commercial farming, whether
Sure.
it's biotech, whether it's conventional, whether
have organic
it's
farms that pollute too.
organic.
Yeah.
There's all kinds
Yeah.
of things that come off of anything that's a large commercial user. But what's important is how do we manage and report this to the community in a consistent way
Right.
where people can monitor it for themselves and feel safe
Be informed
and
about
be
what's going on.
informed, most
Yeah.
important of all.
Right.
And you know, I don't think it's so much the science that is the issue. It's the administration of how we both sit down together and talk more
the
openly
building of the
about that.
trust that both sides are trying to use the best information they can get
And
be
the
open.
knowledge and the method. You know, how do you manage what you do on your farm? Again, this is a
Right.
practice of if we take it down to the small family farm, they can tell you how they plant this here,
Right.
what kind of resource they use to take care of
Sure.
whatever, how much yield is affected because of this, therefore they have to do this to the farm. And there's a
Right.
reporting, there's an
Right.
accordance, they can tell you. They look at the farm, you know, the Department of Agriculture with the minimum, you know, I'm
Oh,
really sad to
not
say
nearly
they're
enough
so
resources, yeah.
understaffed and under
yeah.
budgeted. But with what they have, they do a really good job of trying to help all the people here. And really, the biggest help to the system is the community itself. All the people that actually, they self-monitor. You know, farms will watch other farms to say, because their farming method impacts this other farming
Sure. If you
method.
leave your leaf litter on the ground and then pests infest it, then it affects the neighbor farm. You know, you don't have to use any pesticides to impact
Right.
them. You can
Or
just not. yeah.
if you're not managing, say, patented seed,
Mm-hmm.
and the seed then based on how, you know, things reproduce,
Mm-hmm.
and that moves over to a farm that isn't interested in that kind of crop production, is
Yeah.
now been, you know, imposed upon basically, and
Right.
and there's a huge economic and
Sure.
and
You can destroy the
biological-
value of the organic farm's
Completely.
organic crop because
their
it's now not
livelihood.
organic anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those things are things that we get concerned with. But again, with the pesticide, it's not only farm to farm that's impacted, it's people to
Sure.
farm. You know,
Sure.
our waterways may be impacted.
Right.
Is it? How is it? So it's really important to understand how do these large commercial farms that do biotech seed crop, how do they really get out there and manage these things and show us how are they keeping it safe for the rest of the community? And if there's been, you know, a request to have this kind of reporting, this kind of discussion, I don't think that's unreasonable.
I don't think, yeah, it seems reasonable to me. I mean,
Don't you think
perhaps
so?
you can hide behind things like, oh, this is a trade secret, or this is a commercial secret, but when it comes to things that like pesticides that might blow into people's backyards or into their schools, people have a right to know what is being put on the land and what are the odds of certain levels of exposure.
Exactly.
And,
I think so too. And so,
yeah.
so just going on that point,
Yeah.
as far as my opinion and what others that come and join us in our
Yeah.
group at the
Yeah.
Environmental Caucus,
Yeah.
that's really pretty much high on the
Right.
list, you know, of
Right.
how do we understand, how do you manage, you know, that what you're doing on that farm so that we are not looking at how come there's 10,000 sea urchins dead in a bay and it happened because potentially, you know, pesticide use ended up going into a stream that goes down to the ocean that impacts the sea life.
Right.
This is all hypothetical.
Right.
Completely. But
I
you
mean-
know what? People saying it and bringing it to light is of concern to me, because it's like going, that's interesting. How do we accommodate that? If there was a management and a report, we could cross out the fact that the biotech companies were at fault, because there would have been this study showing us.
Yes.
You know, I'm trying to look at things where if we're going to really talk about coexisting with one another, then the more that they can share these points as to what they're doing as a company and how it's impacting a community, the more we'll find ways to live together.
Right. So there should be a
or not.
way to build trust. You know,
Trust
information
and
is the way to build trust.
is the way. It is absolutely the way.
Right.
So I'm just trying to come at it from another perspective of, you know, I have others in our group that don't have any trust for where they've seen things go. And what's happening when you have 7 billion people on the planet and 5 billion of them are saying, you can't bring that into our country. That's
all the countries that have banned genetically modified organisms in food.
And that's a serious issue, because again, if you want to talk about the science behind that, I would think all those countries have been, who are part of a very civilized global understanding, are telling us there's concern. And maybe the concern would be handled better if there was more clear information shared between the groups, so that we can look at this from the perspective of to help humankind. If it really is about helping humankind, then some of these things should kind of be shared with the people.
Yeah, for example, like this golden rice that's meant to address vitamin deficiencies in the third world. It's a biotech crop that has been very successful where it's used to prevent vitamin deficiencies, and yet now it's banned in a lot of places just because it's been tarred with this negative image that all organic seems to be. In some areas I see, or it seems like there's an ideological basis for being against GMOs as opposed to a scientific basis.
I beg to differ with you on that one.
I'm not saying that you have that's where you're coming from.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah,
but what I'm saying when I say I beg to differ on that one is, again, there are other factors that are just as important as the science behind why something is good for people. The other side of it, again, if we go to the economic value of its sustainability in a country and its concern about taking over, you know, other crops that are not part of the patent process and going through that entire system of where are people's rights in protecting their food, I think you'll find that's a pretty big factor in why there's 5 billion of them.
Well, U.S. patent law is a bit of a mystery to a lot of people. I mean, the fact that pollen from a field that happens to have patented plants in it can blow into another field, contaminate it. Now it should be considered a pollutant, but now instead, the farmer in the contaminated field now owes a royalty or has to destroy the crop. This is a quirk of patent law that has just got to be addressed, I think, in the long run.
It really does.
The organic farmer's right to farm organic is being threatened by this quirk of patent law.
Right to farm. You know, where, again, they're trying to tap on currently here in the state of Hawaii. They tried to get in there and say right to farm is why they should be entitled to, as the state overseeing the process of what's decided in the counties. Right to farm. The right to farm was set up for small family farms. When you really read into the bill, it was set up for farmers to be able to coexist in communities that are residential and that are ag-related. Just like what they're hoping to look at when they're saying, you know, the biotech company wanted to make that an issue as far as to defeat the purpose of what the island of Kauai and the island of Hawaii are doing. And that's a legal thing. You know, again, we're getting into these play on different words, on different thoughts, but the intention of Right to Farm was really centered on small family farms and having a pig farm in a residential community that might be putting off odors, or another farm, a lettuce farm, or another truck crop farm that's running a tractor at 5 o'clock in the morning, and does he have the right to do these activities in this community? And you know what? Most of the communities will try to find a way to understand what's going on, and they will work it out. And they don't have to go to the state capitol to solve the problem. That's what I'm saying about all things. In Hawaii, there are ways to get things done without us having to bang on the door of the state capitol and say, we need a law to do this. We need a law to do that. In truth, what we need is more information between the parties that are being impacted and have them come to some kind of understanding. Is this right for us or it isn't? And that we respect them as they do what they do. So,
mutual respect.
That's the big word, you know, respect. So many levels, Michael. So to me, that's how I look at farming. A lot of respect there.
We need to take another break.
Okay.
All right, so this is Think Tech. The show is for the benefit of humankind. We're talking to Juanita Kawamoto Brown, chair of the Food and Farm Sustainability Committee for the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii, and we'll be back shortly.
We want to thank our underwriters. Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve. Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. The High-Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha, welcome back. This is Think Tech. This is for the benefit of humankind. And today we're talking about food and farm sustainability beyond biotech, the whole community, with Juanita Kawamoto Brown, a food and farm chairperson for the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. And when we left for the break, we were talking about respect and how that will help communities work together to deal with these issues of integrating agriculture with urban and perhaps different kinds of agriculture together. You mentioned earlier that there's been a resurgence of some organic papaya growing. We've gotten the virus under control with the genetically modified papayas and the biotech papayas, but now we have an opening to sort of start bringing back these other plants. Is there a way, in your view, for organic and biotech to coexist on one island?
Okay, so that question is a big question.
Oh, okay.
And
Perhaps too big for us right now.
I think so. I can tell you from my own personal view of what I've observed and studied over the years that we've been watching these two things go back and forth in issues, that it's very difficult to have organic farming coexist with biotech farming, purely because of that same reason of 5 billion people saying we don't want this in our country. And I think a lot of it has to do with ownership. You know, it's a concern. I think that is one fact. Another fact is that biotech farming methodology, they do utilize, as far as I heard at an info briefing I attended at the state capitol last year, that you know, there were farmers that visited from the mainland, and the Farm Bureau brought them over, and their point was, you know, we grow organic things with GMO seed. And we said, oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you define organic
Right.
and GMO in the same
Right.
sentence, you know? And what was my understanding in that discussion is that they use organic method to take GMO seed
Right.
to grow at
Right.
its use.
Right.
And so the people from the Organic Trade Association who basically puts that USDA stamp on this is organic, don't define organic that way. And
Yes.
and that farmer
Right.
who made mention at that info briefing really kind of skirted around the reality. And the
Right.
reality is an organic product or an organic food has to start from its seed as an organic. So saying that you can use a kind of type of farming even as
Right.
organic method to convert and GMO seed
Right.
is really
Interesting.
incorrect. So again, but that is a defined
the definition of organic.
It's a
So-
definition that
yeah.
is supported by the United States Department of Agriculture and through the association that it acknowledges as the means to define organic products as the Organic Trade Association. That's where it makes it a challenge to say,
Sure.
can you have GMO and organic growing, in the
Yeah.
same capacity?
Yeah. But so when I'm thinking about papayas, I think of the gene that confers resistance to this virus as a kind of vaccine that's in the seed with the plant from the beginning, as opposed to having to be injected. You can't imagine going and injecting hundreds of thousands of papaya trees with a vaccine, but if you can get it into the seed and plant them, now you've got a very economically viable way to vaccinate the papayas. And if you have 90% of your papayas are vaccinated against this disease, and the other 10% are organically grown, well, in the sense, it's just like human population. If 90% of people are vaccinated against measles and 10% aren't, well, measles isn't going to spread through the community, despite those 10% that aren't vaccinated. And a similar dynamic may happen with the papayas or some other crops. I don't know the statistics right now. And yet this is very different, though, than some of the large-scale agriculture, I think, is provoking a lot of concern. For example, the people who are growing their papayas, that's for human consumption mostly in the state. The people that are growing large monocultures of soybeans or corn or other crops, a lot of that's for export, and it's the huge scale of the industrial ag, I think, that's given people some cause for concern, because they see the crops and the profits going away and not staying. The profit doesn't even stay in the community. Whereas with go down to any of the local sustainable farms, there's I have a friend, Farmer Ed, out in by Hawaii Kai, and you go to his farm and he's got rows of very different crops growing together, very labor intensive, but very beautiful farm. And what he does is he hires people to work on his farm. People pay him, the money gets recirculated in the community. It stays in the food, and the money stays here locally and benefits the economy. And the same thing could be done with the papayas, even though they're not organic. They stay here, and the money stays here. So is this so clearly? I'm trying to formulate exactly the question I want to ask. As I see it, there's good biotech, and then there's biotech that supports perhaps a large industrial scale agriculture that's given people pause, for concern, because it doesn't stay in the state and benefit the state. And do you see a distinction between biotech that can benefit the small farmer versus the biotech that is mostly for the benefit of large-scale ag that is quite different from the mixed sustainable stuff we see with Farmer Ed's farm?
And again, my thoughts when we were talking at the break were, if we get to the source of the issues right out there right now, which is a source regarding pesticide, for example. Okay, and I'm not avoiding your question, but I'm saying that what we were talking about is actually a facet of where you're asking me, can these things do this and coexist and be together?
Right.
How does a biotech company who does biotech farming manage pesticide use?
Right. Well, how's anybody managed pesticide use? Yeah.
Okay, so do you know, or see, that's why I'm saying, do we know? Do we know? We don't really get that information easily.
Yeah.
You know, and again, it's like you said, there are patent concerns, there are scientific right to own whatever through the patent, there are liability concerns, there are economic concerns. So all of those are how the companies look at things. And we live in such a litigious time. Now everybody's ready to sue everybody for anything.
Yeah.
You know,
tough time.
just it's a tough, it's that kind of philosophy is what kind of puts us at this, again, dilemma where nobody respects one another. Nobody's willing to talk to one another about these things. And so then when it gets like that and the people are involved and it's their community, it's their home, it's where they wake up in the morning, even though you could be giving them the, you know, the most wonderful solution to solving all your problems in the universe, they still need the time to sit down and understand it as a community and say, this is a good thing for us, so we can go there. And when we don't give that consideration and respect to people in every level, not just what we're dealing with here on what we're talking about as far as biotech companies, but every level, just coming out on all these issues that we see that come out in our newspaper when the legislature is trying to decide on something, when counties are trying to decide on something, when neighborhood boards are trying to decide on something. You've got to start with lots of good information, lots of community input, and lots of respect.
Good.
So.
And on that note, we'll take another break.
Okay.
I'm Mike Deweert. This is Think Tech for the benefit of humankind. We're talking with Juanita Kawamoto Brown of the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii about the future of ag in Hawaii and biotech. So we'll be back.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Horry for Think Tech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
Aloha, I'm Mike Deweert. This is Think Tech for the benefit of humankind. And today we're talking about sustainable agriculture in Hawaii with Juanita Kawamoto Brown, who is the chair of the Food and Farm Sustainability Committee for the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. And before the break, we were talking about respect and how communication and openness is the way to perhaps make it more viable for there to be a biotech and a community that are both vibrant and working together effectively for the future of Hawaii.
Understanding, getting understanding of, again, I hear you, biotech. Can it live in Hawaii? Should it live in Hawaii?
Yes.
Those are things that the community wants to answer.
Right.
But again, there are factors that are not really directed just to the industry of biotech. The factors, again, are things that have to do with the other things that balance why we all live here in this state.
Right.
So if biotech would work with the balance, if they would sit there and figure out a way to say, we can go here, we can go there. I hear what you're saying as a community. I want to. It would be great. Unfortunately, some of the things that I've been observing in the last 4 years that I've been down at the Capitol as a citizen advocate, not a lobbyist, is that there are a lot of lobbyists in there that go down for the biotech companies, and they kind of leave a negative impression. You know, the community sees it as, why are these guys, you know, all of a sudden we're trying to hear things. Like, for example, we asked for a hearing to talk about GMO labeling. Okay, and that's people's right to know what's in our food.
Right.
You know, and so it's something that's again happening across the entire nation. Over 26 to 28 states applied for GMO labeling bills last year, probably more today. Some of the states have gotten them through with the intention that other states need to work together. Why is this all based on what for biotech? It's just for people wanting to know.
Right.
They just want the right to know this food is made because of this process. Okay. Just like how, and they're saying, well, why don't you just have buy organic then?
Right.
Because there's not enough information out there about these products that are all food processed, that have all these, and it's a very complicated, I understand, it's a complicated process to have to try and look at. And I understand, you know, part of it, but it's just like, if it's so good for humankind, then what is the problem to give us the right to know?
I agree.
You know, and the Democratic Party of
trust.
Hawaii in 2012 passed the resolution through through the Democratic Party that we support GMO labeling.
Sure.
So again, I'm just getting to the point where it's again asking for information.
Right.
You want us to respect and regard where you're coming from. Can you see the viability as to why we're saying, and if the food proves to be healthy for our people, and people don't have the problems, because there's a lot of talking about it right now. There's all kinds of information and misinformation.
Sure.
But if you had it labeled and we were able to show that humankind is actually thriving because of this kind of food, then great.
Great.
And again, the production becomes at a level where more people want to be able to go there. That would be great. The other side is their worry about the other side.
Right.
If it becomes deemed as a negative thing because now they see GMO and I don't want to buy that. So you know, it's still people's right to know.
You have to communicate the science clearly, as well as economics, that people can say, oh, I think I understand this. I trust that this scientist is doing their best to actually present the evidence.
Yeah.
And instead of the mistrust, you can't just say the science is too hard to explain.
Right.
You got to make the effort to explain the science to people.
Thank you, Michael.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about. Managing information, getting good information. So, you know, here in Hawaii, when we come back down to who we are on this 50th state, is that still we hold a lot of values. We're a young state in the aspect of the 50 states. And as a whole, when we look at how Hawaii manages itself, it still holds true to some of the things that the Hawaiian nation always valued and the culture values. And
we are unique.
And that's what makes living here so wonderful. And it'll continue to be that way as long as we work with each other.
As long as we work with each other.
And we work with aloha.
Aloha,
Lots of aloha.
The respect, the communication. The science is understandable to people. Don't be so arrogant. You say they can't understand it. Explain it to people.
Thank you.
And don't use... And because a lot of people are concerned, for example, that they're using certain kinds of genetically modified crops as an excuse to just be lazy with agriculture and use pesticides to do the job that you shouldn't be using pesticides to do. Just because you can throw pesticides on your crop, it doesn't mean you should throw pesticides on your crop. And those are the kinds of issues that people are concerned about, and they really need to know. They need to be informed.
And that industry, biotech, could help, you know, with that issue. So
it could.
And these are some of the things that I think can help us.
Well, thank you, Juanita. Thank you. I've enjoyed our talk today, and thank you for coming on the show. This is Think Tech. This show is for the benefit of humankind. We've been talking to Juanita Kawamoto Brown of the Environmental Caucus. She's the chair of the Food and Farm Sustainability Committee of the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party, and we'll see you next week with another show. This one will be on education. We'll be talking about STEAM. science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. And thank you very much.